Best-selling novelist and author of the iconic memoir, The Glass Castle, Jeannette Walls.
Thank you. The most precious gift I ever received was a really wacky childhood. But for much of my life, I did everything that I could to hide the details of that story. I love hearing other people's stories, but I thought nobody would understand mine. It's just so nutty and sometimes dark and sometimes magical, but always chaotic. And I did everything I could to hide that. I became a journalist and told other people's stories, but went to great lengths to hide my own. I'd become quite friendly with another journalist, and he told me everything about his life, but I kept quiet about mine. And then finally one day I figured I just had to come clean. So I told him one day, I said, you know, there's some things you should know about me. I had a kind of weird childhood. And he said, well, what do you mean? And I said, well, when I was 3 years old, I was cooking hot dogs for myself, and my dress caught on fire. And I had to be taken to the hospital, and I got a bunch of skin grafts and stuff like that. And he said, what are you trying to tell me? I said, I'm covered with nasty scars. And he said, why are you telling me this? I said, well, I'm a little dinged up. I'm kind of damaged goods. And he said, you're apologizing? He said, oh, no, don't ever apologize for those scars. He said, those scars are a sign that you survived and that you are stronger than whatever you were up against. And I said, I just wish I was nice and smooth like other people. And he said, oh, no, smooth is boring. You have texture. He said, texture is really interesting. So I married that man. I married him, and he pulled my story out of me, and he urged me to get it published. And I got to tell you, I was so wrong about people. They understand my story. They are so compassionate and empathetic, and often in exchange for my having told my story, they share their stories with me. And sometimes they're crying and they'll say, I'm so ashamed of this. I've never told anybody before, but I thought you would understand. And I'm thinking, why would you be ashamed of that? That's a beautiful story. And then we're, oh yeah, that's the way that I felt too. And one time I traveled to this really well-to-do area, Southern Florida, and we're talking major money. And I told that story about what my husband had said about wanting to be smooth and like everybody else and not have texture, and him saying that smooth is boring and texture is interesting. And afterwards, this woman comes up to me and she says, sweetie, come here. Let me explain something to you. And she said, there is no such thing as smooth. She said, you look close enough, silk's got texture. And I thought that's the wisest and kindest thing that anybody has ever said to me. And that is why I share it with you all today. We're all a little dinged up. We all have our texture. And what I ask of you is that if you are lucky enough to have the silky texture, don't think that that somehow makes you less strong or less fascinating. And if you are lucky enough to have texture that's a little bit rougher, don't ever be ashamed of that. It is your texture. They are your scars. They are your stories. And sharing them can change your life. Thank you so much.